into the U.S. economy and natural gas as well. Natural gas is a big part of the economy now. So I think, generally speaking, if you look at the overall risk, we don't have that problem of inputs, of oil and gas inputs. Yes, there's always that risk, and then you have to look at the context of everything else that's going on. You're seeing pretty impressive GDP growth in the U.S. Over the last few quarters, but also forecasted for this year. And then look at the context of the other factors: tax reform, massive deregulation, and massive foreign direct investment and business investment at home. So, I think collectively, okay, higher oil prices are never good for economic growth. But if you look at the total inputs coming into the economy and the tax reform and deregulation, I think we're in really great shape here in the U.S.
John, China's latest 5-year economic plan emphasizes increasing consumption as a share of GDP, but with rising energy prices, will Chinese economies be encouraged to spend right now? They're reluctant enough as it is with all that's going on in the Chinese economy. What measures will China be taking to insulate its economy and get Chinese consumers to start spending?
Well, certainly there are some lessons here to be learned. We learned that energy security is very important. We cannot rely too much on external sources. We view this very differently, I think. We view this as an opportunity. The country is already transitioning towards renewable energy sources. In any case, China is definitely indisputably leading in solar energy, leading in wind power energy. So, this is an opportunity that further accelerates China's transition towards that direction. I can guarantee you, the number of cars being sold that are EV cars as opposed to ICE cars, ICE meaning internal combustion engine, right now in China is just happening very, very rapidly. And within the event in the last few days, with the gasoline price just rising just a little bit, I think a lot of households are rushing out to buy electric vehicles as opposed to ICE cars. So I think this is a more of opportunity. And I think the entire energy supply structure in China is under a huge transformation right now.
Mushtaq, Europe has been trying to wean itself off of Russian gas since 2022. It still relies heavily, though, on imported energy. It's more reliant upon American LNG right now, but the price of that is soaring too. Can Europe afford that?
So as I said, I think the fiscal picture is certainly more challenging than 2022. But when it comes to energy infrastructure, I think Europe is actually in a slightly better place to weather this energy shock than was the case 3 or 4 years ago. There's not one overarching solution to the energy supply crunch, but I think across a range of potential policy responses, Europe is in a slightly better place. I think you have seen the EU engage in gas to coal, switching for the purposes of power generation. That will reduce gas consumption. It will reduce stress and pressure on already depleted inventories. There is, of course, the opportunity to import a lot more LNG from Norway, by a factor of 15, 20, 20%. And I suspect we will see the EU doing that. And then, as you said, and I agree, imports from the US from LNG are at record levels, and there is capacity to do more. And so I suspect across a range of different options, you will see the Europeans manage to weather the storm, albeit, as I say, on the economic policy response side, I think EU countries are more constrained than they were 3 or 4 years ago.
Greg, US employers shed 92,000 jobs last month. Stocks have climbed. Bond yields, though, have fallen. The US dollar has weakened across President Donald Trump's second term so far. He's welcomed those movements in the markets, but the war threatens to disrupt that. For a president who frequently refers to market strength as evidence of his presidency's success. What are the risks for him personally here?
Yeah, I think the president, when this war is over, or even before its conclusion, get back to focusing on the economy. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's his real, number one policy or policy focus. And you saw that in his first term, where you had, massive real wage growth in the U.S. So it's not just the stock market. And I think the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talks about this often. It's the parallel growth. It's not just the stock market, it's real wages. We're seeing real wages go up. And in the first term, we've actually recovered some of the wage losses of the Biden years, where wages were down 4%. And so, in President Trump's first term, the real wages were up 8%. And so, that is the real focus. It's not just the stock market, it's real wages. And yes, we're seeing real wage growth already. We did see that 1 month blip in employment, but the prior employment numbers were pretty positive for President Trump. So, I think net, again, back to my context earlier of tax reform and deregulation, and the fact that these higher energy prices compared to the Arab Spring of 10 or so years ago, compared to the Biden years where there was hostility to the energy sector, we are still much lower than those moments.
John, Beijing may be less vulnerable in terms of energy shock, but the country's export machine is exposed to the threats of a growth slowdown to inflation. Will that impact upon China's economy? And what would that mean also for the rest of the world?
Well, that I definitely agree. I think the world's largest trading nation needs a peaceful environment, and it's not a good thing to see these wars breaking out in many places right now, and definitely affects our exports. The Middle East, the Arab countries, Israel, for example. These are huge markets for Chinese exports of electric vehicles, and you can imagine how much of that is being affected right now. So I think definitely I would expect to see March and April exports number to be adversely affected. Now let me also mention that in January and February we're seeing a 20% increase in exports, which is a spectacular number. But inevitably, I think this is going to have an impact on China's exports. So that is why we like to see this conflict to be ended very soon. And I think there's a lot of things we can debate about why this war erupted in the first place, and this is a justified war or not. Right. But by now, I think definitely America needs to. President Trump needs to take a step back, and he can't just walk away like this. Okay,
forgive me, John, forgive me for interrupting. I've got about a minute left, and I just want to get one more answer from Mushtaba. What does Europe need to do to avoid the worst of the energy shock?
I think it is going to try to use the leverage it has against the Trump administration to force it into a diplomatic and negotiating process with the regime in Tehran. And once the hot phase of the war is over and the proactive shooting has stopped, I suspect the Europeans will be willing to play a role in the context of the Strait of Hormuz. So I think the goal is to engage the administration and get the Trump administration to bring the conflict to a speedy conclusion and engage in diplomacy as quickly as possible. And that in turn will mitigate some of the downside economic consequences very briefly, for the region.
Very briefly, Mushtaba, can the global economy avoid a recession?
Again, it really depends on how long the war continues. Asia and Europe are clearly the most disproportionately affected, and that is very much a function of how long the war continues and whether or not we escalate from where we are today.
Gentlemen, there, I'm afraid we must end it. Many thanks indeed. Greg Swenson, John Gong, and Mushtaba Rahman. And that's our show for this week. If you'd like to get in touch with us, I'm at A. Finnegan on X. Please use the hashtag AJCTC, or you can drop us a line. Countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our email address. As always, there's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our page, and there you'll find individual reports, links, and entire editions for you to catch up on. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. Our coverage of the Iran war continues right now.
As the war on Iran widens, its impact is spreading beyond the battlefield. Shockwaves are hitting global energy markets as facilities are damaged, supply routes disrupted, and risks to vital shipping lanes grow. Stay with Al Jazeera for continued coverage and expert analysis.
In-depth analysis of the day's headlines.
Diplomacy, yet again, was used as a ruse for war.
Critical debate.
Who betrayed the table? Who attacked the negotiations for the second time? For the third time during the talks we should be attacked? Who is talking about a greater country for itself? Israel, not Iran.
Iran has been a huge supporter of terrorism over the years. I really have to take exception to the idea that Iran is innocent in this.
Inside Story on Al Jazeera.
We saw this exact same pattern happen in Gaza, the same lazy, flattened reporting that we saw in Gaza when it comes to the war on Iran.
The Listening Post decodes the media on Al Jazeera.
It's 17 GMT, 8 p.m. in Doha. You're watching Al Jazeera's extensive coverage of the war between the U.S., Israel and Iran. I'm Fuli Batibo. Coming up, Israel says it's killed two high-ranking Iranian officials, the security chief and the commander of the besieged internal force. Iran launches more strikes on central Israel and carries out further attacks across the Gulf region. Also this hour.
When I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat.
The top U.S. counterterrorism official resigns, accusing Israel of dragging Washington into war. And nearly 1 in 5 people in southern Lebanon have been forced from their homes, with Israel launching what it calls targeted ground operations. It's been more than 2 weeks since Israel and the United States launched their attack on Iran, a move that has thrown the region and global markets into chaos. And there appears to be no end game in sight. Just a few hours ago, Israel said it killed Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani, during an attack on the capital, Tehran. Since the war began, Larijani has been a central figure in the leadership structure, second only to the supreme leader. Israel also says it's assassinated Gholam Reza Soleimani, the commander of the feared internal security force known as the Basij. There's been no comment yet from Iran on either of the reported killings, but Israel's prime minister says their deaths will pave the way for regime change.
We are undermining this regime in the hope of giving the Iranian people an opportunity to remove it. This will not happen all at once. It will not happen easily. But if we persist, we will give them the opportunity to take their fate into their own hands.
U.S. President Donald Trump has welcomed the strike, saying Iran's leadership has been decapitated.
Their leaders are gone. I guess one of their top person was, they say, a lot of people say their actual top was killed yesterday, along with somebody else who was responsible for the killing, the man that was responsible for the killing of 32,000 people over the last 2 weeks. He was in charge of the killing of protesters. It's an evil group. I mean, they've killed much more than 32,000 people. And the man who was responsible for that was also killed yesterday.
As we mentioned, Ali Larijani has been an important figure in Iranian politics for decades. He's been Iran's security chief after being appointed secretary of the Supreme National Security Council in August last year. Larijani joined the Iranian Revolutionary Guards in the early 1980s and later held several roles, including Speaker of Parliament. In 2005, he ran for president, but he was unsuccessful. Larijani has been considered a balancing figure in Iranian politics, but after the U.S.-Israeli airstrikes killed Iran's supreme leader, he issued a strongly worded message saying the attacks had set the heart of the Iranian nation ablaze and that Iran would burn its enemies' hearts. Well, we have a team of correspondents covering all the latest developments from Doha, Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, and we begin with Ali Hashem, who's in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Ali, Still no official confirmation of the killing of Larijani and Soleimani. When could it come?
Well, just a few hours ago, we had an exclusive interview with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who made the first comment on this assassination, despite the fact he said he's not aware of the fate of Mr. Larijani and he've heard of the news. But he said that the system in Iran isn't built upon one person or several people. Rather, it's an institutionalized system that is going to continue whatever happens. And he refers to the assassination of the Supreme Leader, and that even the Supreme Leader, with his importance and his centric role and instrumental role within the system, that did not lead to the collapse, and that whoever is doing this, the United States or Israel, do not understand the core of the Iranian system.
Noor O'Day in Ramallah, what are Israeli officials saying about these reported killings and how are they framing these assassinations?
Well, they're framing them as a victory, Folly. Israel has long been specialized, if you will, in assassinating its adversaries around the world, mostly Palestinian, but also Lebanese and now Iranian officials. But this particular assassination against Ali Larijani, if it's confirmed, would be very significant in the Israeli narrative, because for more than a week now, he's being described by commentary in Israel as the most dangerous mind in Iran. This is a man Israel knew could play a very critical role in a negotiated end to the war, which is an outcome that Netanyahu and the government in Israel do not want, because the objective, as it has been stated by the Prime Minister, is not just related to the nuclear capacity or the ballistic missiles. It's about changing. It's about ending the Islamic Republic of Iran, replacing it with an Israeli-friendly one.
So, Tawhid, coming back to what's happening internally, Ali Hashim, what's happening internally in Iran now is that we have also the head of the Basij, Gholam Raza Soleimani, reportedly killed. He was responsible for internal security. Has there been any noticeable change since these reports from Israel came out? Any reinforcements of checkpoints, for example?
Well, we just been back from the middle of the center of the city. There have been some checkpoints, also people in the streets. Since yesterday, the government have been calling on people to get to the streets and to do their iftar in the streets, because there are a lot of threats. Also, there were in different areas in downtown activation of anti-aircraft fire. So yes, situation is tense. We can see that the situation is tense, and whatever is happening, which is starting with the killing of course, Larijani and head of Basij, besides the continuous and relentless Israeli-American airstrikes around the country, it's clear that this tension is mounting hour after an hour.
Noor O'Day, this operation, what does it say about the extent of Israel's intelligence penetration within Iran and its ultimate goal? And also, we've heard from President Trump in the last hour, any indication at all that the U.S. was working alongside the Israelis in carrying out this reported operation?
Well, there are no indications about a specific U.S. role in this operation, in this assassination, Foley. What we can say is that Israeli officials were racing really, to claim responsibility for those two killings. The defense minister actually came up before the prime minister, which was a bit odd. But internally, domestically, this is important for the ruling coalition because it reinforces the brand of of Israel as a military superpower in the region, as a country with unmatched intelligence capacity, the companies that produce the technology to penetrate all the defenses and to penetrate the telecommunications of countries have made tens of billions of dollars in the past 3 years, Folly, the Israeli companies, that is. And at the end of the day, the debate right now in Israel, whether an overthrow of the government is possible, many point to the fact that Netanyahu wouldn't mind chaos in Iran, a failed state even in Iran. Geographically, it is quite distant from Israel. It wouldn't have an immediate impact on Israel, but at the end, Netanyahu would be able to claim absolute victory and would sit at the helm of the geopolitical power structure, which is exactly what he wants as he eyes elections in November.
All right, Noor, thank you very much. Noor O'Day in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Ali Hashem in Tehran, thank you both for the updates. Well, the U.S. director joining me now to discuss this further in the studio here in Doha is Ross Harrison, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and author of the new book, Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy, and also with us, Sultan Barakat, professor of public policy at Hamad bin Khalifa University. Thank you both for being with us. As we heard from Noor, our correspondent in Ramallah there, Israel's goal has, it seems, been for total regime collapse within Iran. Ross first, does the reported assassination of these top two security commanders take Iran closer to that today?
Well, it's too early to determine that at this point, Folly. I think it certainly takes up one of the key two individuals that were key to the sustenance and sustaining of this regime. But whether, in fact, it can regenerate itself and what kind of leadership comes next is something that we have to remain to see. So it certainly doesn't help, but my sense is that this regime that there's a certain amount of regeneration built into this regime institutionally, and we're not there yet, if ever.
Okay, your thoughts, Sultan?
I think it's a serious blow to the regime, to the government in Iran, but also it shows that the government in Iran has not yet got hold of the intelligence